HybridPathways has partnered with industry-recognized security expert and global Chief Information Security Officer Roland Cloutier to share experiences and knowledge about timely security topics. Today, Dan Hyam, managing partner at HybridPathways, is talking to Roland about beyond shifting left and the operational imperatives of privacy and security by design. Roland is highly credentialed in this area after his extensive expertise as Chief Information Security Officer at ByteDance and TikTok, ADP, EMC, and the military. He has been honored with industry recognitions including IDG CSO Hall of Fame, CISO 100, Information Security Executive of the Year, and one of the most influential people in security. He's a sought-after public speaker and has been featured in global publications, national television, and has lectured for many governments and universities around the world. He wrote the book, Becoming a Global Chief Security Executive Officer. Let's get started.
I have with me today Roland Cloutier, who is an esteemed CISO that I've worked with for many years, and I'm very happy to talk to him today about beyond shifting left, the operational imperatives of security and privacy by design. And so the first thing I wanted to start with, Roland, is what do you mean by beyond shifting left? I think we've understood the concepts of shifting left in DevSecOps, SecDevOps, shifting left in DevOps, but what is beyond shifting left?
Well, Dan, first of all, thanks for having me. Second of all, I've never heard you call me esteemed before, so that's awesome. I now have it recorded. But yeah, I think this concept of beyond shifting left is getting beyond the concept of just putting tools, technologies, and processes in place to have better secure code in the coding process, right? That's really what shifting left was all about. How do we stop flaws before they become problematic in operations in GA and code? And so beyond shifting left is how do we get further into the business process, the business decisioning, the design of a product, things of that nature. So we're doing things that are encompassing of not just security considerations and quality considerations, but privacy consideration, control management and insurance, jurisdictional considerations. All of these things rolled up to have a better product by design at the time of development, right through coding and delivery. So when we say beyond shifting left, we really mean getting into the methodology of how we design and deliver product from the minute we think about it to the minute it goes live.
That makes sense. So of course, usually when CISOs come into, global enterprises or any type of organization, there's already established processes in place. And just for a moment, if there was a greenfield or you're starting from scratch, where do you start? Meaning, where in the organization would you start to be able to get that more holistic view?
Well, I'm not a big believer in greenfields because I don't think that ever really happens unless you're a brand new company. But if I had the perfect place to start, it's going to be at the product or operational design and approval level. I mean, as a business, we want to make great business decisions. As security risk and privacy executives, one of our responsibilities is not just to make the organization more secure and safer, but it's also to make really smart decisions based on how we go to market. Where do we go to market? What technologies are we putting in place there? So I think when we start talking about how a product is going to be used, who's going to be used it, and what jurisdictions is going to be being used in, all of those things up front to ensure that we're all clear of what our risks are, what our solutions for those are, and how we're going to protect it going forward should all be part of that decision process. So doing it right up front in the way that we ideate and the way that we make business decisions.
So that's an interesting concept. And, I want to touch a little bit more on that, which is when you've already kind of established a baseline, and we've heard this in the industry before, which is build the controls into the software development cycle or DevOps process as early in the process as possible. And you're talking about beyond shifting left. So my next question is really just focused on how do you look at, and when you're trying to design this and look at it holistically, you're really talking about kind of business process design. So do you get into that, or are you trying to just insert the governance into the existing business processes, or are you actually trying to design and help the business processes so you're enabling that in from the start? Because obviously we're talking about governance, or basically administrative and process controls become very important in this.
Yeah, that's a broad question. So let me answer it like an attorney. It depends. Just kidding. They're really, you're going to have to do both. At the end of the day, if you have great technology development processes in place and quality control processes in place and SDLC and CI/CD processes in place, don't interrupt them. Engage in them. Make it part of how you're going to add on to their functionality to create net new functionality. But it is a process. You're going to have steps in place that before we decide what products are being developed, as they are being developed, and when we understand things like what country are they going to be used in, what type of data will be flowing it through there, we can offer things in the process to the developers to say, that's going to be a individual, maybe under the age of 13, using this product in the United States, in these states. Therefore, you have to do these 6 things. Maybe it's about, understanding where data has to be stored. So offering up during the process, this is the infrastructure that it has to be coded on, and this is where the data has to be stored. All of these things are super important. So when you get to the end, you don't end up already in a legal, regulatory, or jurisdictional issue. My belief is that you can build these in. Obviously, there have to be processes up front that guide you through a quote unquote business or development process. But tooling, technologies, shared code management, things like that are most larger organizations already have these. And simply by extending those and adding capabilities onto those, you're often in a pretty good place to start.
So that makes a lot of sense. And really, you're talking about a decent amount of sophistication in the controls that you need to build in by design. And it makes me think about, especially if you're, let's say, a new CISO or something of that sort in a global multinational corporation, and you may be doing some evolution of your operating model or something of that sort, and you're thinking about these things of, by design and beyond shifting left. How do you determine what's the best, operating model of how you're going to insert yourself, or at least embed the capabilities into those processes that you were just talking about?
Well, first of all, you're not going to make that decision. You and your peers and partners are going to make that decision, right? If you're not accountable for delivering the code, you can't make that decision. And if you're not accountable in your organization for deciding what privacy requirements or cybersecurity legal requirements are in each of the jurisdictions that you operate in, you're not making those requirements. Your general counsel or attorney specific to each one of those areas or CPO office is going to be making those. So the most important thing here, Dan, is making sure that you have the right people involved. You make your CPO's life much, much easier when they can provide guidance and automatic functions up front in a development process for the development or product organizations when you enable a program like this. So get them on, get them excited about what you're trying to accomplish. It's work. When you decide the process, they're gonna say, here's the top 15 questions we need to ask for our type of products in the industries and the regions that we serve, right? And they're gonna say, and based on those, there's gonna be 20 potential different answers below each one of those. And so all of that work needs to be done by the experts in those fields. So just like we would do in security, in DevOps and DevSecOps, in application security design management, we have to spend that time up front, and you have to get those partners involved. Now, when it comes to process ownership, this is always a big question. I was recently on a call with like some of the top 50 CISOs around the world, and there's this question of like who should own process in delivering the code. And I think the overwhelming discussion was whosever job it is to deliver that code, the CTO's office, vice president of products, vice president of development, whatever it is, they should own that process, and you should be a peer and partner in that, in giving them and providing them services to enable that. And they're going to make the decisions on how that works in the delivery cycle. So again, it's more about how you integrate and work across lines organizationally with your peers, rather than how you define how it will work for the company.
Those are very good points. And so what you make me think of is for those process owners, how do you put the enforcement in place? Or do you have some examples or just some ways that you would approach to actually get that governance in place? And it seems like you're talking about a lot of these controls are going to be automated because you need that at scale. But I'm just curious, how do you enforce this?
The same way that we did within the first series of shift left efforts, right? If you didn't commit your code and that code didn't go through a security quality validation check or post compile validation, then it didn't move on in the pipeline and it didn't get to code. So the enforcement point is really through the engineering process and function. You have to answer the question and show that the appropriate control or consideration is actually implemented in effect before it moves down the pipeline. It's really that simple. Use the engineering control functions as the mechanism. By trying to pull it out of the process, by trying to shifting it over to this team through a ticket and then managing it this way, you're going to invite a lot of confusion, a lot of slowdown, a lot of unnecessary rub between teams that you simply don't need. Most of the time, if a developer is going to develop a product, they have to get approval to get the resources. In order for that to happen, it has to be approved through engineering leadership. So follow those processes, but add on to it, specific information that they have to answer, like where is this product going to be used? What type of data assets or elements will be in it? And then use the existing systems to pre-populate for things like code snippets or code ideas or requirements or authentication and authorization mechanisms, for a specific area, or code to support logging efforts necessary for certain types of data assets or data utilization across the globe. You can provide that saying, hey, you've suggested you're going to be using this product that you're developing for this. Here are three things that make you compliant. Which one would you like to use? Right. So working within the established ecosystem of development is the best way to enforce this.
That's a great point. And you made me think of something when you talked about committing code. And so I just want to talk briefly around software composition analysis, because when you're talking about, for example, like global multinational companies, you're going to have very distributed DevOps groups, typically, because a lot of companies and organizations are moving to agile methodologies. And you have to have, distributed and or centralized governance around all of that. And as we've learned from, different breaches in the past, it can be very hard. Like, for example, Log4j was a part of a lot of shared libraries within an organization's ecosystem. And it was difficult for some organizations to be able to understand, where their vulnerabilities are. And so you have that balance of, you want to be able to have that complete visibility. You want to be able to enable shared libraries, but yet you might have sophistication in multi-jurisdictional countries and regions and so on and so forth. And so I was wondering if you have any tips, from, being in the trenches in terms of what can you do? Like, what are some of the approaches that you can take to try to protect against those potential flaws that may come out, which we've seen many times in the past?
Yeah, Log4j is a complicated discussion, right? Because we're talking here about instantiating process that helps you make business decisions along the way, and then enables the developer to choose the right controls necessary to apply to a product or development a development project that they're working on. When we talk about code and code analysis, there are many tools out there. And this is way too short of a session to jump into all of the capabilities out there. But some of the basics are you can have technology that runs at a developer level. So it's essentially watching what a developer is doing and helping them fix simple issues like cross-site scripting or known introduction of inappropriate code, and so on and so forth. You can have technology that looks at code after commitment, runs through it overnight or whenever it's committed, and then provides feedback into the QA infrastructure so that the developer gets immediate feedback or near immediate feedback once the code's there, so they can make remediation as necessary. You can also have technology that accesses the code on an ongoing basis, creates libraries, understands which libraries and what code's assigned to which library, and then can give you a centralized level of transparency. I mean, let's face it, what was the problem with Log4j was a lack of transparency across the code architecture and infrastructure because things were committed independently. And really at that time, a centralized overview across multiple code repos was really not a standard. And I think we've changed that for the industry, being able to tap in independently, by a simple API and token that now gives authoritative assessment and quality technology, the view across multiple repos, multiple libraries, and then can respond back in context, has the ability to look across all of those, understand who owns it, who committed it, and then provide that feedback. I think that's, you're getting that transparency, you're getting the access to that information. So I think you have to have, it's like defense in depth. You have to have things at the edge, you have to have things, crossing barriers, you have to have things at the core. Well, it's not really any different in code development from a security and privacy perspective. You have to have things, as it's being developed, after it's committed, after it's compiled, and being able to broadly see across the entire development space to understand what's the totality of code within your environment. So I think you have to have a comprehensive approach with the right tools.
That's excellent. And what's really important, I think, is that you're talking about the key places for instrumentation within a lifecycle, along with that holistic approach that's associated with beyond shifting left. And you're really talking about the importance of privacy and information security controls within the environment, like you just astutely and articulately stated. And I was just curious, again, especially for privacy, how do you get the assurance that what you've instrumented, what you've orchestrated, how you've done global, security or information security and privacy by design? What type of assurance have you used to say, okay, yes, but let's not talk about audit, where we're talking about the effectiveness of controls, but you want to know that you're managing the IT risk appropriately. What's the level of assurance that you're looking for, and how are you getting that?
Again, great question. This is all about engineering. I mean, what we're talking about is software development, program development, product development, things that are developing code, and it's engineering. And what we're talking about here is privacy engineering. So having the right resources available to the teams to be able to be the coach, be the supporter, be the person that a design engineer or a coding engineer can speak to, that can be the person that also does the validation, does this control work, that helps develop the privacy controls in code that the organization can reuse and utilize across multiple products to have a better control fabric and capability. So this is about people. I mean, this is about experience. It's no different on the security side of the house, Dan. When we started migrating things to cloud 10 years ago, we had to take people that were great enterprise security engineers and turn them into incredible cloud security engineers. Well, in the same respect, we have a whole new set of capabilities, requirements that governments are giving us across the world, and this is translating into codifying privacy requirements, which requires privacy engineers, people that understand the why, people that understand the how, and ensuring that within your job descriptions, within your job families, within your organization, or within your total workforce capabilities, which may be consultants you bring in, may be an extended surge part of your workforce to help develop these things, but you have privacy engineering capabilities if you're doing this type of product development. It's an important part of how we will look at the holistic delivery of secure and privacy considered code in the future.
So I think this is really excellent because I want to pull on this, what I think is a little bit of a novel concept, because this is take an example of an operating model and a methodology. Let's just say agile methodology, and you have autonomous squads. And of course, you usually have, product, and let's also say it's a productized model. So you have, product analysts, which you could equate a little bit to business analysts. You have, product leads and product management. And then you also have lead engineers, and you have the engineering function, and you have the turnover to operations and how they're working in that model. And you introduced a concept here that I really like, which is the privacy engineering. And I think this is a slightly different and maybe even novel concept in the sense that typically, these types of squads or just those teams, they would consult with legal, they would consult with privacy. But now it seems like, and I just want you to, either confirm or expand a little bit on it a little bit more, which is you're actually embedding privacy engineers into these squads to build it in by design. I feel like this is really getting to the heart, not only with just information security, but what beyond shifting left is, because this seems a little bit of a newer concept in my opinion.
It is, and it needs to be progressive over time. But listen, I love, and I made an attorney joke earlier, but the reality is I love my attorney partners because they bring transparency and clarity to the legal requirements that I just wouldn't understand in both the cyber and privacy area. But on the flip side of that, they depend on me to be their operational arm, to be the implementation of controls. I mean, the attorneys, some have, but and you see some very gifted, technically gifted attorneys that do this work, but many are privacy law experts, and they can help decipher the requirements and provide you with information. But turning those requirements into controls that are appropriate, repeatable, measurable, all of the things that regulatory authorities are going to hold you to, you need engineering capabilities. And by the way, it is not security, it is privacy, meaning that you have to have people that focus within this discipline. And so the same way that we applied security application engineering experts to assist the engineering organizations, and in many cases have now they become team leads to do that operational level of work. We're going to need engineers who do the same thing on the privacy side. And now, whether they report into privacy, they report into the CISO, or they report into engineering, it doesn't matter. It's organizationally specific based on time and need. I think your point, though, is well taken, that it is a new function with new requirements that is going to be needed, and how you get the training for that is not the easiest thing, because you have to have people that really want to operate in this space, that are engineering experts, that went to school as engineers, but are driven by a passion in privacy. So yeah, it is relatively new. I believe it'll follow the path. I don't believe it'll be so different as secure by design concepts or shifting left with security or embedded security engineering within engineering functions. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take experience, because in security, you don't do cross-site scripting. In security, you don't do authentication bypass. In security, there's certain things you just do. If you think of the OWASP Top 20 or any standard that you want to look at. In privacy, it's different. Privacy, it's under jurisdictional consideration. It's under requirements for the type of people that are using the product, under 18, under 13. It depends, and sometimes, look at the United States, the state you're operating in, what you can and cannot do. And so it takes a legal focus on a per jurisdiction basis, then the applicability of control capabilities at a privacy level across that. Now, sometimes we can up-level that and say, this is the most stringent, so we're going to do this across the product. But in many cases, you don't want to do that, from cost constraint, usability, UI, all of the real reasons that you would want to do it by jurisdiction. But Again, it's going to be a process. It's going to take a few years to get there, but I think most organizations will see it as a mainstream senior level engineer that they're going to need to be part of their engineering and security organizations.
That's great. And it's always an evolution. And, really what you're talking about here, I think, at least at a high level, is, maturity steps and being able to move that forward based on, I would say, a decent amount of material that we've covered today. So, because we've talked about a lot of stuff, and, if you could give, a piece of advice, where should an information security organization start to be able to continue either to evolve in this beyond shifting left into privacy and design concepts, or building security in by design along with privacy? What would be your advice in terms of where do you start? What's the first step that you take? Do you have any advice on that?
Dan, I think you touched on it earlier. We touched on so much stuff, but if you said, Roland, what's the one piece of advice? It's about getting visibility. I mean, it's really about documenting the process of how which decision making is happening, how your CI/CD or your DevOps process works, and making sure you know where decisions are being made and how you can insert additional process or capabilities or decisioning for your business. So I think my first thing is make sure you get down to a single mechanism, because and people will laugh at that because, obviously, IT, dev has one way of doing it, product dev has another way of doing it. But the closer you can get to one process, the closer you can get to a single methodology that an organization uses to go from conceptual design to code delivery and GA, the better you will be able to implement these type of changes at the speed that they're changing in the industry and around the world.
That's wonderful. It sounds like a shared service to me.
Could
Well,
be.
Roland, I think that wraps up this session. I want to thank you very much for your time. And as always, it's a pleasure.
Dan, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the next one.